The Top Floor Please podcast, where women in leadership rise together. I'm your host, Melissa McCormick, executive coach and founder of the Grace and Salt Leadership Academy. This is your space to find clarity, grow in confidence, and lead with bold authenticity. Whether you're navigating the boardroom, building your team, or stepping into new territory, you're not alone. Let's talk real challenges, real growth, and real leadership because the top floor isn't just a place, it's a mindset. Alrighty then, let's get started.
Welcome back. Welcome back to this next level series. So if you've been with me over the past few weeks, you know that we're unpacking the leadership behaviors that separate high performers from high performing women, that is, so that you become the obvious choice for the next level. So today's conversation, we're going to build on everything that we've covered so far. Before I go any further, I just want to big shout out to my son and daughter-in-law. This they bought for me when I left corporate in 2019. This was a gift that they gave me, and they got it off of Etsy. And it is, I don't know if you can really see it, but it is a bunch of broken glass, and it was to represent breaking through that glass ceiling. So very special to me, and I just wanted to shout out. And so for everybody listening to me today in this episode, I just want to congratulate you. And we'll talk about that glass ceiling as well in the future, because I've got some pretty strong opinions about it. But today, let's just kind of focus on what we're doing today. I want to ask you this question. Have you ever watched someone else get promoted, right? And your first thought was, you know what? I honestly thought it would be me. Like, why is it not? And it's not because you're arrogant. It's not because you're saying, I'm like all that and I'm much better than that other person. But, and it's not also because you think that other person isn't capable. I'm pretty sure you're probably thinking, yeah, I suppose. But it's also because, or maybe you might be thinking that, but I'm guessing that it's because, you've invested years and years and years into your career. You've delivered those results, stayed late, you've led your team, solved the world's problems. You've been very, very loyal. You're respected, you've credibility. And so when someone else gets the opportunity, it's totally natural to wonder, how come? Why? Why her? Right? Why him? Why not me? So today, I want to answer that question. And I want to do that because after spending decades in executive leadership and now coaching high-performing women, I can tell you this. The answer is rarely what people think. Welcome to the Top Floor Please podcast. I am your host, Melissa McCormick. This podcast is for high-performing women who are ready to stop staying stuck and become the obvious choice for the next level. For years, I was the go-to doer is how everyone depended on solving the problems, getting things done. And what I didn't realize was by doing more of that, it wasn't preparing me for the next level. It was keeping me from it. My breakthrough came when I stopped trying to do everything myself and I started leading through others. I stopped being the go-to doer and I became the go-to leader. So if you've ever felt stuck, overlooked, or wondered what it's going to take to reach that next level, you are in the absolute right place. Because here's why. This is all about today's episode. That next promotion isn't about who works the hardest. It's about who is already leading at the next level. Okay, so you're leading at the next level before you get to the next level. That's what this is all about. So we're just going to kind of dive in here and talk about this. So when someone else gets promoted, our minds immediately start writing stories. Maybe she's better connected. Maybe the boss likes him more. Maybe it was politics. Maybe they overlooked me. Maybe I should have worked harder, and maybe that's what I'm going to do. Right? Organizations, they're not perfect. Biases do exist. We've talked about that. Politics absolutely exist. Relationships matter. I had a boss one time who said to me, Melissa, you need to learn how to play politics. And I said, I don't play politics. I don't believe in politics. I don't want to, I absolutely don't want to play them. And he said, you need to learn. You need to start, right? Now, what he didn't say, which is what I learned later, is that I'm actually quite good at politics, but politics in my way. I looked at playing politics as being, that, when you say, oh, he's a politician, it's that's not a good thing, right? To be called a politician. There's an aura, there's a reputation, there's a, sliminess, if you will, at least in my opinion, to that moniker. And so that's what I didn't want to be known for. But I did learn that politics is really all about relationships. And so what I learned was that relationships matter. Okay. And I'm absolutely not going to pretend that they don't. They absolutely do. But here's what I've observed over this 30-year career that I've been on. Most of the time, executive teams believe they're making the best decision for the future, not rewarding the best performer from the past. Right? So here's what they're asking. Let me just kind of explain that just a little bit. Who can lead us where we're going, not who did the best job where we are? Okay? Does that make sense? So I want you to be thinking about that. Who can lead us where we're going, not who did the best job where we are. So if you're that person who's like, I'm like doing all the things, I'm pretty proud of myself. Like I think I'm kind of rocking it, right? Where you are. But are you focused on the future? Are you thinking, like if we want to talk about strategic thinking, listen to my previous podcast episode. If you're not spending time thinking about where we're going and how we're going to get there, and you leading that way, then we've got some things that we need to talk about, right? So here's where many talented women unintentionally get stuck, because you're comparing experience, you're comparing performance, technical knowledge, work ethic, hours worked, all of that. Meanwhile, the executive team is comparing something completely different. Can she think beyond her department? Can she influence peers? Can she develop leaders? Can she make difficult decisions? Can she represent the organization? Can she, oh, this is a good one, can she lead through uncertainty? Different scorecard. Again. And this is exactly what we talked about in the last 2 episodes, right? That invisible scorecard and strategic thinking. They aren't truly buzzwords. They're the criteria executives actually use. I remember reaching a point in my career when I believed the next promotion would naturally come because I had proven myself. I've told this story before, so you may have heard it, but I'm going to tell it again. I honestly thought that because I was working so hard, someone was going to tap me on the shoulder and say, Melissa, you are awesome. Thank you so much for making sure the business is moving and that you're organizing things and everything's great. And because of that, we are going to promote you. That's honestly what I thought. And you might think that too, right? I was producing results. My team was performing. People depended on me inside my department and outside my department, right? And I thought that was enough. And then I started paying attention to the leaders who were advancing. And what surprised me wasn't that they worked harder. In fact, some didn't. I won't name names, but some didn't. Yeah, but yet they got the job. But what they consistently demonstrated was something different. They were already operating as if they were in the next role. They asked different questions. They delegated differently. They spoke differently. They spent their time differently. They weren't trying to convince people they were ready. Their daily behaviors already reflected the expectations of that next level. And that realization changed everything for me. So I want to get this. I want to get this practical here. So I'm going to give you 5 behaviors that get noticed. Okay. So first behavior, they solve organizational problems, not just department ones. They naturally think beyond their own area. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it 100 times more as we continue. And that's enterprise thinking. For those of you who are following me, you knew that was what I was going to say. Enterprise thinking. They are thinking beyond their own area. Second, they develop their leaders. They're not the hero, they're the guide. They're building heroes. They are the guide for the heroes. Third, they influence without relying on authority. People follow them because of credibility, not because of position. Right? Influence without the title. I have a podcast on that, so search it. The fourth is they make decisions, not reckless. They're not crazy about it, right? But confidently. They understand leadership requires judgment, and they understand the culture. They understand how their bosses think, and they can then make those decisions on their own confidently. And finally, the fifth one is they protect time to think. They have their firehouse time. They have their strategic thinking time on their calendar, which is non-negotiable. They're not constantly reacting. They're creating direction. That's executive behavior. So one of the healthiest leadership habits that you can develop is replacing comparison with curiosity. What do I mean by that? Well, instead of asking why her or why him, say, what leadership behaviors is she constantly demonstrating? Like watch, observe, study successful leaders, study those people. There was a leader at my organization who, I probably talked about him before, but he was somebody that I studied. He probably doesn't even know it. He was a good friend of mine, but I studied during crisis how he responded, how he reacted. He had this quiet leadership about him, right? Study those leaders that you gravitate to, that you would follow into war. Study those people and see, oh, I like how they did that. How can you incorporate it into your own leadership style, right? You're not copying their personalities, but you need to understand their patterns. How do they communicate? How do they spend their time? What meetings do they decline? It's a big one. What questions do they ask? How do they influence conversations? Leadership leaves little clues. I want you to pay attention to them. You need to be, we're studying. So be a detective and figure out, oh, okay, that's how that happened. Did you hear how he said that? And then everybody listened? Or, he didn't really take the answer. He didn't like the answer he got. So he said it in a different way without becoming defensive and without putting other people on the defensive. And eventually he got to the root cause, right? Pay attention to those people. So I just want to kind of take a pause here for a second. And I want you to write that down. I want you to write down who in my organization am I going to study? Whose leadership do I follow? And why do I follow them? Okay. Think about that and pay attention. Be intentional. Like when I first started this business, I had a whole campaign on be intentional. I did a logo. I did the whole thing. I believe we need to live our life intentionally, not just naturally or organically or whatever. We need to be intentional with what we're doing. And that's what I'm asking you to do right now. So here's the question that I wish more leaders ask themselves. If your executive team watched you for the next 30 days, would they conclude that you're preparing for your current role or your next one? Okay. Would they say, oh yeah, no, they're preparing for their next one or preparing for their current one? I want you to think about that. Promotions don't happen the day your title changes. They begin months or years before anyone announces them. People are always watching. Many, many, many years ago, I was at a McDonald's convention. I loved McDonald's conventions. They were amazing. And McDonald's they just know how to do it right. I'm a big fan. And I was at this McDonald's convention in Orlando. I was responsible for putting together the booth, our booth, and at the trade show. And so, anyway, unfortunately, the CEO at the time had a massive heart attack the day before the convention opened. So everybody's in Orlando, everybody's getting ready. It's kind of high energy, everybody's having a good time. And we all get an email that says Charlie Bell passed away. And obviously, put a huge, like, black cloud over the event. But so here's what McDonald's did not do. They didn't cancel. We continued forward. And they had already prepared, it's crazy. I don't know how they did it, but they already had prepared a tribute to Charlie. Now, he had a heart attack, so they didn't know this was going to happen. But they already had it prepared. So opening ceremony was a tribute to him and then the next person in line. They knew who that was. So Charlie passes away on whatever day it was. Let's just say it was opened on a Saturday. I don't remember. But, on Saturday. And then on Sunday morning, when at opening ceremonies, the next president comes out and just leads, right? So that next person had already been groomed, right? They knew succession planning. That's how do you do succession planning? They knew through, I don't know how many deep, because I have no idea. This was just an experience that I had. But they knew who was going to be next. So I guess my whole point in telling you this story, first of all, it stuck with me. But second of all, people are always watching, and not in that negative way. They're observing how you lead, how you think, how you respond, how you influence, right? That promotion meeting simply confirms what they've already been seeing. Does that make sense? Right? They've been watching you. And so then promoting you is because they've seen how you lead going forward and not doing what you're doing. So today, I just have 3 key takeaways that I want you to write down. Executive promotions aren't based solely on past performance. They're based on confidence in your future leadership. How are you going to lead into the future? How are you going to take our organization and move it into the future? Number 1. Number 2, I want you to stop comparing your resume to someone else's. I want you to start comparing leadership behaviors. Study. And number 3, I want you to become known for leading at the next level before you have the title. Think about Charlie Bell. Think about that. I think that was his name. Pretty sure that was his name. But think about that. Think about leading at the next level before you have the title. That does not mean, please don't misunderstand, it does not mean that you're a director and you're going to pretend you're the vice president and therefore you're going to throw your weight around and you're going to overstep and step on toes and overstep people. It doesn't mean that at all. It does mean I want you, when you're in meetings and you're the director or the manager and we're talking about a project, I do want you to ask those questions. I do want you to have the courage to speak up and say, here's what I think might help the overall organization, or here's how my department can help achieve those goals, even if it's going to add more work to your plate and to your team's plate. That's what it means. Okay. I hope that I've explained that distinction, because I definitely don't want you, it will be career ending if you pretend that you're an executive vice president or a vice president or whatever, and you start throwing your weight around and you start, causing chaos and pretending as if, right? I do want you to act as if, but I want you to do it in a very respectful and leadership way. So, okay. That was just a little sidebar there. I want to go through those three key takeaways again because I do want you to write them down. The first one is I want you to understand that executive promotions aren't based solely on past performance, right? They're based on confidence in how you're going to lead the organization into the future. Stop comparing your resume to someone else's. Study leadership behaviors, and finally become known for the leading for leading at the next level before you have that title. Okay, so before we wrap up today, here is my question for you. If the promotion decision were made tomorrow, what evidence would executive leaders point to that says you're already operating at that next level? Okay, because that's ultimately what they're looking for. They're not looking for perfection. They're not looking, promise me, they're not looking for another certification. They're not looking for another late night. They're looking for evidence. Evidence that you're already thinking, that you're already influencing, and that you're already leading beyond your current role. Okay, does that make sense? If you have any questions on that, I really do want you to reach out to me. I will help you work through it, whatever that looks like. So, if today's episode had you wondering whether there are leadership behaviors that could be keeping you from your next level, I want to invite you to take my free What's Holding You Back executive readiness snapshot, right? It's an assessment. 5 minutes, you're going to discover the leadership gap that could be keeping you from becoming the obvious choice for that next level. You're going to get some practical next steps to help you move forward with greater confidence and clarity. So just go to graceandsaltleadership.com and you'll be able to find the assessment there. So remember this. Your breakthrough begins the moment you stop being the go-to doer and become the go-to leader. All right, everyone. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. If this resonated with you at all, please share it with somebody who can benefit from it as well. I definitely want to be sure that these podcasts are absolutely spreading the good news. And don't forget to subscribe. So, all right. Thank you so much, and keep leading forward.
Thanks so much for hanging out on the top floor. If today's episode gave you something to think about or a little boost, share it with your friends to keep the momentum going. And hey, if you're ready to rise, find your voice, and lead with clarity and confidence, we'd love to connect with you. Reach out at graceandsaltleadership.com to learn how Grace and Salt can support your growth. Remember, you don't have to lead like everyone else, just lead like you. All right, I'll see you next time on the top floor.